But I'm going to start with this. Now, for those of you that are attached to the PNN News and Ministry Network, you probably have had the chance to at least take a quick look at this because several hours ago it was posted to our network. But what I'm going to talk about is an executive order out of the Donald Trump White House that was signed December the 21st, 2017. So just as we were going into the Christmas holidays, this executive order was signed. It's interesting. This was also signed right about the same time. I think this is the same time that the United Nations was meeting to decry his signing of the United States Jerusalem Embassy Act. I think you'll find that as an interesting correlation. I don't think this executive order has anything specifically to do with that directly. But the executive order is titled Executive Order Blocking the Property of Persons Involved in Serious Human Rights Abuse or Corruption. Okay, now I'll read that to you again in just a moment. But folks, listen, if you don't know, if you've not heard about this, this is really fascinating. And I've been on the phone today with some people who have some real insight into this and some people who have some pretty deep contacts into Washington and even into the White House that gave me their insight, their opinions on where this could go, what this executive order might be up to, other than the obvious surface text. And I'm going to read some of it to you. It's not a very long order, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because some of it is not directly related to the first part, and it's the first part that I think is really, really powerful. So I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend like I'm one. I'm not going to play one on this show today. I'm just going to give you my opinions. I'm going to read some sections from this executive order. But for those of you that haven't seen it, this is not fake news. This comes from whitehouse.gov, presidential actions / executive order, and then the title of the executive order. Now, I have this posted to freedomfriday.carlgallops on facebook.com so that you can go there and see it. And if you are involved in the PNN News and Ministry Network, you know it's posted on several Facebook accounts and probably the syndicated blog as well. So just want you to know this is not some conspiracy theory stuff. It's not fake news. White House. All right, now let me get back to it. Here's the title again. Executive Order Blocking the Property. And as you get into it, you'll realize that what that means is basically seizing property and financial assets, who are involved in serious human rights abuse. Well, that would be like pedophilia rings, right? Human trafficking. I mean, that's serious human rights abuse. And there are other categories of serious human rights abuse, and I don't know that this actually spells out, particular offenses, which to me makes this executive order even more powerful because it's of a relatively general nature. Executive order blocking the property of persons involved in serious human rights abuse. Watch this. Or corruption. Well, you reckon there's any corruption in Washington, D.C.? Okay. So we're going to start seizing property and financial assets of people in the deep state? Maybe? I don't know. Now, that's not what the executive order, the surface text doesn't really go there. Let me just give you some of the surface text, okay? And then I'm going to tell you what I think about it, and then I'll tell you what the opinions of others that I have contacted today are about this. So let me start off. I'm going to get to the meat of it, but just to set up the context, by the authority vested in me as President, Constitution, laws of the United States, et cetera, and by the authority vested in me, not only by the Constitution, but including the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, and that's all quoted and referenced, the IEEPA, the National Emergencies Act, that's U.S. Code 1601, the NEA, the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act, that's Public Law 114-328, and on, Section 12F, etc. And then of the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1952, which is U.S. Code number 1182, and Section 301 titled United States Code. So in other words, this executive order, President Trump says, is based upon the authority granted to the office of President of the United States through all of these various laws and acts and orders and etc. Okay? So then he says, I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, find that the prevalence and severity of human rights abuse and corruption that have their source in whole or in substantial part outside the United States. Now, when you first start reading it, you think, oh, this is dealing with people outside of the United States who are messing with us. Well, surely it is. As a matter of fact, he lists a bunch of those people and nations by name. I'm guessing about a dozen. At the end of this executive order, he calls it the annex. At the annex, and then I don't want to bore you with going through all of these names, but I'll give you some of the main players, some of the main countries involved. So he says this is directed at people who are violating human rights and involved in serious corruption in whole or in substantial part outside the United States, such as those committed or directed by persons listed in the annex, all right, that's the people at the bottom, who have reached such scope and gravity that they threaten the stability of international political economic systems, human rights abuse, corruption, undermine the values that form the essential foundation of stable, secure societies, etc., etc., and then he goes on to describe that and how dangerous it is. And he says, the United States seeks to impose tangible and significant consequences. Oops, the page jumped. Hold on, right when I was reading it. I know your internet does that sometimes. Here we go. All right, here we are. Tangible, significant consequences on those who commit serious human rights abuse or engage in corruption, as well as to protect the financial system of the United States from abuse by these same persons. All right, so that sounds like a very reasonable, and by the way, I'm telling you right now, I like this executive order, and I like where I think it's going, by my opinion. And the opinions of others who are much more intelligent than I am, especially in this area, and who have contacts inside Washington, D.C., and even at least some very powerful indirect contacts inside the White House. They also hold a very similar opinion that I do about what this really kind of is about. Okay, so let me keep reading. It says, I, therefore, that's Donald J. Trump, determine that serious human rights abuse and corruption around the world constitute an unusual, extraordinary threat to national security, foreign policy, and the economy of the United States, and I hereby declare a national emergency to deal with that threat. I hereby determine and order. Now, here's what you want to listen to, folks. Section 1, paragraph A. All property. How much is all? Everything. I guess underwear out of your underwear drawer. I'm not sure. All property and interest in property that are in the United States that hereafter come within the United States or that are or hereafter come within the possession or control of any United States person. Of the following persons, and that's in the annex, are blocked and may not be transferred, paid, exported, withdrawn, or otherwise dealt in. All right, then it says the persons listed in this annex to this order, any foreign person determined by the Secretary of Treasury and consult with the Secretary of State and Attorney General, to be responsible for, complicit in, or have direct or indirectly engaged in serious human rights abuse, et cetera, et cetera. Now, hold on, folks. I'm getting to the punchline here in a moment, okay? But I just have to set this up, because if I just read the punchline to you, you're going to say, well, what was the context? Okay, so I'm setting the context right now. And I know that might be a little boring with all this legalese, but then I'm going to kind of translate some of it for you, at least in my opinion, and then the opinion of others. But then it goes on to say that this is pursuant to, related to, current or former government officials, and the context there seems to be U.S. government officials, or a person acting for on behalf of such an official, who is responsible for or complicit in, or who has directly or indirectly engaged in, listen to this, corruption, including the misappropriation of state assets, the expropriation of private assets for personal gain, corruption related to government contracts, or the extraction of natural resources, like uranium and Clinton Foundation money and Fusion GPS. And let me keep reading. Or bribery, or the transfer or the facilitation of the transfer of the proceeds of corruption. And then it goes on to talk about collusion and cooperation with foreign governments and officials in these kinds of activities and human rights violations. Folks, listen, it goes on and on with a bunch of legalese. As I said, when you read this executive order, signed December 21st, 2017, it appears that it's aimed solely at, when you first read it, foreign governments and foreign powers that are seeking to bribe and coerce and pump money into the United States to mess with our economy, et cetera, et cetera. And we should. And I'm proud of this president, because the last president, last 8 years, not only didn't do it, but actually assisted foreign governments in doing that junk. So this president saying those days are over. But did you hear the language? The executive order says, I'm going after people, if I'm reading it right, and again, I've got some really smart people who have read it and have agreed with me, I'm going after people even in our own government who have been involved in deep corruption and human rights abuses. Could this go to pedophilia rings, pedophilia island, the Clintons, the Podestas? Could this go to Fusion One? Could this go, Uranium One? Could this go to Fusion GPS? Could this go to the Clinton Foundation and all of the folks? I think Donald Trump, now remember, he signed this back in December. And it outlines the mechanisms. You have to go through the DOJ, et cetera, et cetera. He can't just do it himself. But this is powerful. This is huge. I don't know if I did a good job, and we've got to go to break. I don't know if I did a good enough job for you to really understand the power of what this might mean. And if I find out later that I'm wrong in my translation of it, I will come back and make it right. Again, I'm not trying to play lawyer, but again, I called some folks today to kind of check behind me and call other people and to make some contacts with people in Washington or people that have contact. Read with basically what I'm telling you right now, that this executive order can certainly be used as the Trump presidency goes forward in dealing with the deep state. How do you deal with it? You go to these people, you get indictments on like a Hillary Clinton, and you seize everything. And as Mallory's telling me right now, you drain the swamp. I think that's what this is about. I think this year is going to be powerful, and I think it's all going to happen before the midterms, because Trump has got to show the American people what's really going on. I think people are going to go to jail before this year is out. I think important people, powerful people. I'm not going to venture to guess who they might be. I know who I wish some of them would be. I think you're going to hear something about this birth certificate thing, because that all ties in. That's the foundation to a bunch of this. We'll talk about that later as well. If you want to see this executive order, go to freedomfriday.com, Gallups on Facebook.com, or just do a Google search, Executive Order Blocking Property of Persons Involved in Serious Human Rights. And the date is December the 21st, 2017. President Donald J. Trump. Drain the swamp. Make America great again. Freedom Friday. Aren't you glad we've been doing this for so many years? Look where we are now.
American Survival Wholesale is proud to sponsor this ministry and their efforts to shed light on the issues that face our nation. As a veteran and Christian-owned and operated company, we support the freedom to express these Christian principles. We all understand the importance of being prepared. After witnessing the devastation of Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and the wildfires that affected so many, please support this ministry by clicking on the link below and check out the amazing alt media package for our listeners. Plus, if you use the promo code PNN Radio, that's PNN Radio, you will receive free shipping, a savings of up to $200. Just click on the link below, but please do it today. Your support means so much to this channel.
The Satanists wanted to install their own tribute, a pagan idol, on the Capitol grounds right next to the Ten Commandments.
Billions around the planet are witnessing a world in the grasp of sadistic spiritual darkness. This unholy alliance has infected our governments, our religious institutions, and our societies. The world appears to be unraveling. But can the evil behind these dark supernatural forces be defeated? Is everything playing out just as the Bible predicted it will in the final days? At last, you can know the answers to mankind's most urgent questions and learn your destiny among today's events in the new, unprecedented work taking the prophecy world by storm. Gods and Thrones, Nakash, Forgotten Prophecy and the Return of the Elohim by best-selling author, former decorated law enforcement officer, and senior pastor Carl Gallups. This changes everything. Available now wherever fine books are sold.